Welcome to the Michael Simmons Show, where we help you create blockbuster content that changes the world and builds your business. We dive deep into the habits and hacks of today's top thought leaders. Now, here's the show.
Today, we have Niklas Goeke. I have been friends with Nick for several years now, and so it's really been awesome to watch him grow. I spoke with him when he was just getting started, and over the past few years, he's just really blown up. He's written many hundreds of articles that have been read tens of millions of times. He's also created the website 4minutebooks.com. You've probably seen it when you search a book name. It does really well in the search results, and it gets hundreds of thousands of views per month. And he's another person that's just an example of being very consistent. We're going to talk about his writing routine and how he guards his writing time and just doing that over years. He's also an example of someone where you can't make excuses about being too busy, because he really built his writing while he was getting a master's from the university in Germany. So without further ado, I give you Nick. All right. Welcome to the podcast, Nick.
Glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I've been saying how excited I've been to do this call and just really admire your journey from starting in your early 20s in writing to being where you are now at 29. And I was curious, when did you start writing? I became aware of you 2015, but how far into it were you at that point?
That was pretty early, I think. I started at the end of 2014, September 2014, I think. I published my first blog post on my blog. That was a public kind of writing thing.
And did you have any intentions that, okay, I guess if you create a blog, you're going to plan to write a lot, but did you have any structure to it where, okay, I'm going to post once a week about this topic and see what happens, and I want to accomplish this goal and be a writer, or is it just testing?
It was, given how, I think subconsciously how determined I was to be a writer, I didn't really know it, and I didn't have a lot of structure when I first came to it as a activity, kind of. Because the idea to be a writer came to me in 2012, I think. But it was all very, very subliminal, kind of. It couldn't really express it or formulate it. And it wasn't like I had a certain goal, a certain income goal, or anything like that. So when I started in 2014, it was super experimental. And the blog was also a result of some experiments I'd done in the months leading up to it, with building websites, learning some WordPress design, things like that. So I literally just decided to write about the few topics that were on my mind at the time, and, I have some ideas, let me get these out, and then go from there and just keep learning and adjusting as I go. And then I think over the next few months, it became a little more structured. And then, just the structure came as I went along, kind of. Initially, it was very fun and just let me try this, and this would be fun to put together, kind of driven.
Yeah. And what made you in 2012 even be interested in writing, or what was the thing there? What was the inspiration?
I think the one of the furthest ways I can trace it back, or points I can trace it back to, is, interestingly, it was my statistics professor in the United States. So I was on exchange. at UMass Dartmouth, which is it's a state school, I think, in Massachusetts. And I took a statistics class to try and not have to do my statistics class in Germany, because it was super hard. And the professors in Germany agreed, you have to get agreements. And they agreed to it. If I take these two statistics classes in the United States, then I wouldn't have to do it in Germany, and I could just transfer the credits. So I did that. And luckily, one of the classes, the teacher, I think his name was Gary Davis, he was great. We talked about a lot of things, and he actually made us start a blog for the class. So
interesting. So you got a little.
We had to do we had to do a WordPress blog and do our statistics homework every week on the blog with outputs from software, graphs and stuff. And we had to do that. And in the course of that, he taught us a lot, or told us a lot, about the people in this blogging space, which were at the time like Tim Ferriss, James Altucher. So basically, he mentioned those names to us, and I think that was the first time I heard about them.
Interesting. And, so you got exposed to it. Then 2012, you had a little bit of posts. Then 2014, you jump in. How many posts have you now done? It's been about 6 years now. You have to guess.
Probably around 2,000 maybe, definitely well over 1,000. So I think it's got to be somewhere between all the pieces I've done on all the different websites. Should be around 2,000, I think.
And so many people start writing online, and 99% of the people, they're kind of reaching a friends and family audience that they're already that they know personally on LinkedIn, and probably not really any strangers. And how do you account for you being such an outlier?
You mean in terms of just sticking with it, just consistency, or?
Yeah, that you've really built also, an audience, and a huge audience, reaching over 40 million people. I mean, kind of crazy.
Right.
Sometimes it's just a number, but when you actually take a step back, I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I guess it's the consistency also that drives the results at the end of the day, right? So it's kind of like the same thing. I would say that a big part was that I started it as a fun-driven thing. That was I was passionate about it. I had fun writing. I always had fun writing, even in school, doing essays and things like that. And then I sort of picked that back up, and I somewhat professionalized it, right? I gave some more structure to it, and then having the blog and creating a newsletter and so on, and creating some accountability to the audience, even if the audience was super small in the beginning. I think it took me 6 months or more to get my first 1,000 email subscribers. So it was like a long time. It didn't take off like a rocket ship or anything.
How often were you posting in those first 6 months?
I think I started with the almost weekly schedule, doing these mini posts, and then I got more into case studies and more in-depth content, and then I was posting probably 2 to 3 times a month for a while.
Okay, so not even a huge volume. You're still kind of testing it out.
Yeah. No, initially not. I went from short to longer, and then just kept exploring. But I think, the fun part, the accountability part, that sort of came with it, and then the other thing, I think there was a little bit, it's probably the smallest factor, but it is a factor, is I always get competitive about things. So I was playing video games in high school and trying to compete with friends for gamer points and things like that. And so there was a little bit of, once I started being also in this sphere and talking to other people, there was a little bit of sort of competitiveness to it. Not in the sense that, oh, this guy's in the same niche as me, let me try to get more emails. It's more just a general kind of, okay, this person is posting a lot, what can I do? So just as a motivation kind of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. As a side thing, I interviewed Niklas Goeke, and he was talking, he was one of the best World of Warcraft players in the country in high school. And so he became interested, and he did like hundreds of videos, I think, for that. And so then when he switched to writing in 2014, he had that base of understanding storytelling and so gaming was he knew what it takes to improve as a gamer and move up a scoreboard and things like that.
Yeah. It's quite similar in many ways, I think.
And so for you, with in our course on Seminal, we help people write blockbuster articles and get into the habit. And these are people who are older, often, let's say 30s, 40s, and so on. And there's that balance between, okay, I want to do something that's going to make me money. There's a market for it. So it's more of a product market fit. And then, on the other side is the soul market fit. And so it sounds like in the beginning, you were optimizing for soul market fit, really focusing on fun. And how do you think about that balance, and how has that evolved for you over time?
I think for me, it was extremely helpful that I didn't see a way to make money with my writing at first. And it wasn't as obvious in the options that we had. There was no Substack where it's create a paid email newsletter in a couple of clicks. There was no Patreon, or they were just starting and they were very small. There was no Medium partner program. So none of these options for easy, quote unquote, monetization existed. And so I think for me, that really helped because it was driven by the fun part. And I realized even just sitting down writing, that I enjoyed the activity in and of itself. And I would keep doing it. And if 10 people read it and one person said, this is awesome, then there was a great reward for me. And I think that really helped not quit along the way, because I think nowadays what happens with these easy monetization options, just because it's easy to monetize, it makes it look like it's easy to make a lot of money, but that's never the case. And so people get frustrated if the money doesn't come immediately. And so I think the fun part, or focusing on that, or not monetizing if you can't afford to, if you're not trying to force it to work initially, that really helps.
Interesting. So I actually never thought about that. Actually, having early monetization could actually hurt you do you have those expectations? For how long did it take you to make your first dollar from writing in any form?
That didn't take too long. So I started writing on the blog. I also started freelancing on the side, and I started translating. Tried German English because that was my. I'm German, born and raised, and then I went to the US to study, and I've always been fascinated by English, reading English books, and so on. So I started there, and then from there, I also quickly got some referrals and also just reach out to people on Facebook and stuff. And I got some gigs to write articles for company blogs, travel sector, and so on. And so I think within a few months, I was already earning a little bit, at least, like 50 euros an article, 100 euros an article here and there.
So you're more doing it like as a freelancer for other people or translating. But how long until you actually made money, let's say directly from like, hey, I'm Nick, I create courses, or I get paid directly for the articles I want to write?
That part, I think that was about a little over a year, probably 15 months, because in 2016, late 2015, I started 4-Minute Books. And that was the first sort of structured project where I was like, I'm in control of the content and the monetization and everything like that. And it's a simple affiliate model for the website, but that started working sort of immediately as I created it and
oh wow,
working
that's awesome.
on it. So,
and can you, for people who don't know what 4-Minute Books is, can you kind of tell what it is and just the background of the story on it a little bit?
Sure. Basically, 4-Minute Books is a collection of now over 800 book summaries, free online, and you can find a lot of them via Google if you happen to search for book summaries for popular books. Each summary is about 1,000 words, so should be readable in around 4 minutes, depending on your reading speed. Each one has just like 3 lessons from the book, so it's not a comprehensive summary by any means, but it's a short excerpt. You can learn something from some great books and authors for free, and yeah, that's about it. And so I did this initially mostly to create a very much more consistent writing schedule, or much more frequent, I should say. I was trying to find something where I could write every single day, publish every single day, and this was I just put this together as a structure, and then I realized I could put some monetization on it and potentially make it into a project that might work.
And this is going back to routines. And I find it really interesting of all the elements that go into it. So you're doing 2 to 3 times per month. Why did you want to do one once every day? Why was that important to you? And particularly publishing every day.
Yes, I think so. After that first year, in the first year, I did mostly freelancing, and then I was writing on the blog for free with writing. And I realized I didn't make a lot of money. I don't know. Probably, I don't know if we're like supposed to share numbers or not, but probably.
Yeah, if you feel comfortable, the more the better, so people can just understand what it's actually
right. I think I made around 20,000 in the first year that I was doing all of it, and it was enough to get by
while you're going to school full time.
Yes.
Masters and.
Yes. No, actually, that was after school. So I graduated with my bachelor's in 2014. Then I started this completely from scratch, having no experience. I was like, let me try to do this for a year. And after the first year, I did a second. And then I went to get the master's and continue part-time, so to speak. Okay. And now after 5 years, I'm doing it full-time after I graduated with the master's and I'm done with school.
Okay.
As a background. But so in the first year, I was freelancing. I was doing the writing on the blog. I was learning how to build an email list, online marketing, and so on, doing a whole bunch of other things. But I realized, okay, there's some potential here. I think I can make this work. I obviously need more time to figure out how to do it well and stuff. But I also realized that the writing part on the blog was the most fun, and I really wanted to figure that part of the equation out. So I decided to try to minimize the freelancing and focus more on building something of myself. And at the same time, I realized my writing wasn't that good yet. So I just needed to practice a lot. And also, I wanted to make whatever I was building work fast. So I thought, if I publish once a day, that can't be too bad. So I'm just going to commit to this project for the year. And that was my goal, to publish every single day on the website for a year.
So it's kind of like a challenge, not only to get the result, but also to get better at the skill of writing.
Yes.
So
yeah.
What's your theory of deliberate practice for writing, or how did you think about that? In other words, is just the act of writing and doing a huge quantity that will create the learning, or were you trying to, get coaching, study great writers, practice it with each post?
I was definitely trying to make each post a little better than the last one.
Yeah.
And back then it started with things like grammar, and I'm going back now and I find so many spelling errors and grammar mistakes in the older articles, and I'm like, geez. But that's where it started, just reviewing everything from a very technical, grammatical standpoint. That's where it started. And then I was always trying, how can I be a little more creative with the summary? What kind of examples can I draw on that I didn't draw on before? And over time, I started being less focused on the books and more focused on the lessons. So I shifted away from what's in the book and how can I repeat that in sort of my own words versus saying, okay, this is what the book talks about, and the book makes this example, but maybe there's an example in my life that is interesting to the reader. And then, so that's where the creativity part started. So I think it was important to have the consistency.
What made you make that shift to putting yourself into it?
That's a good question. I think, I honestly think it was boredom. I think at some point when you're doing it, and I had a fixed framework for how each article was supposed to look like, because it was supposed to be easy. It was supposed to be easy to keep the routine. And it was at some point, because you have an input, you have an output, and then you know how to get from A to B. And then I started getting a little bored myself. So I was like, how can I add some twist to this to make it more fun for me again? And it goes back to the passion thing, I think, to not let writing become boring for myself. I think that's when I started experimenting.
Interesting. So now I consider that a hallmark of your writing. It's hard to imagine time before that, where I feel like you're always sharing personal stories. And did you, at what point did you start writing on Quora? Because I always pictured you starting on Quora first in my mind.
Quora, I didn't start until 2017. So at that point, it was
really?
I think 2.5 years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So by that point, you had developed a little bit of your storytelling, and now it seems like all your Quora posts are based off of, rather than just sharing an answer to the question, you're sharing a personal story that goes along with it, and really honing your voice and your storytelling.
Yeah, Quora really helped in that regard. So I was trying to, after I did the 2016 experiment and I had the 365 book summaries and the affiliate income was building from the site and it was starting to work, I dialed down and I wrote one summary a week in the next year. And I said, let me go to Quora and try to do the same thing. And I only did it for about 9 months, but I wrote a Quora answer every single day. And I definitely I felt like I had an advantage at that point going into the platform, because I knew a lot of basic storytelling things from the summaries and stuff. But there was also so much to learn there, because now it was new audience. The topics were much broader. The potential to do examples was much broader, and so on. And I think those 9 months also really, really helped me with my storytelling and stuff, and especially then expanding that content later in other places.
Yeah, really interesting. Because Niklas Goeke also, he started on Quora doing a daily post. I think he was doing daily for at least a year while he was doing it full time. So I feel like Quora is an interesting platform because for practicing that storytelling and just getting that feedback loop. How, if you're advising a beginning writer, there's this idea of these challenges that you had, like a 1-year challenge to do 1 post per day on the book, 4-minute books, and then 9 months for Quora. Would you recommend somebody, if they're just getting started, that it's all about get a daily feedback loop and try to get better every post and have fun?
I think so. Yeah. I think the consistency in the beginning is the most important part, because if you can't find your way to that, then it's very hard to get to a point. If you want to be a full-time writer at some point, or even like make a part-time income from it or something along those lines, if you want to do it in a professional capacity, I think the consistency is pretty much the most important part. And you need that as a sort of baseline to, first of all, to build the audience, to get stuff out there, to get better, to practice, but also to show yourself that you can rely on yourself with the writing, so that even if you want to do freelance, for example, and okay, I have something to deliver by this deadline and so on, you want to be able to get that done whenever you need to, so you can be professional, literally. So I think that really the whole consistency part is very big.
Really interesting. And now you're making a really big shift with wanting to do longer form and books where the feedback loop would be a lot longer. What is kind of precipitating this change, and how are you thinking about it in the scheme of yourself as a writer, what you're passionate about, your competitive advantages as a writer, and trying to break above the noise, and even just the online world right now and where it is end of 2020, and there's all these platforms and way to monetize online?
I think from day one, from way back in 2012, I was reading James Altucher's blog, things like that. It was always appealing to me to sort of just sit in a room and write and have that be my job. And then I close the laptop and I'm done. Kind of. That was always a big appeal to me. And of course, I wasn't sure if I can even make that work, right? If that would work as a mode of working for me and so on. But now I think I do. And over the years, as I went back and forth on doing freelance, doing other work and so on, the writing was always consistent. It was always there. But I was never to the point where I was literally just writing, basically creating more, whichever form it takes, books or posts or Medium blogs, whatever. I've never really gone there. And so I was thinking that now might be the time to try that. And if I have this full exposure to writing, if I'm literally writing in the morning, writing in the afternoon, how does that feel? Will that be good for me or not? My gut feeling tells me it's going to be good, and I'm enjoying it so far. But yeah, so it was really it was very driven by what do I want every day to look like. This whole I think it's a popular question and floats around online, right? Don't ask yourself like what you want or how you want to feel like. Ask yourself, what should every day look like? What would be like my ideal daily routine, and work backwards from there.
And so for you really came across that you want your day to be focused as much as possible on writing, not necessarily managing people or the administration part, which is because it's interesting. I'll just share for myself. I can really see the consequences of the models you choose for innovation are for monetization. So if you choose to create a course, then you're going to be spending years understanding conversion funnels, and you're going to create a course, and then you're going to need to learn how to create courses, which is no easy thing. It's easy to put up a course, but to actually create a transformative course, the huge learning loop.
Yes.
And so, all of a sudden, like you're writing part-time again, like an hour or two a day max or something like that. And so is part of it by writing a book or choosing that sort of monetization, or even like if somebody were to choose a Substack, you're getting paid directly for your writing. You don't need to learn. The writing promotes itself in a way, your body of work.
Yes. And over the years, as you write, like you have some viral posts, some do better, some don't. But I feel I'm at the point where if I create something really substantial and it's of substantial value to the people who read it, there's going to be enough people spreading that around so that I can kind of rely on it to, if it's monetized, somehow have a good return for me. And in terms of the creative part, and I've done courses and stuff like that, and I agree, right? It quickly becomes another job. And I like doing these things occasionally, but I have to feel in control about the time that I spent there versus how much time I spent writing. And sometimes I got sucked into these other commitments where it ended up being the opposite, and I was scrambling to find the time to be writing, and I always hated that. And
right. How do you think about? I try to really guard my time. I have to really fight for my writing time, like on the weekends and like in the mornings. Meetings are always trying to creep up in the morning. I'm always trying to push them back. And also I just have to fight my own tendencies that I see an opportunity to do something. And I was like, for you, I know you have lots of publications that you manage on Medium and on Quora. For me, we have 7 different Facebook groups. Just yesterday, I was just drafting the post to announce a new Facebook group. I'm like, let me just hold off here. Like, I don't want to create another Facebook group. But how do you battle all those different forces and really stay true to that?
One thing I'm doing, so I think I'm my own worst enemy. So in terms of distractions, very easy for me to give in to them. In terms of opportunity, very easy for me to want to jump on everything. Of course, also, and that becomes more difficult as you get more opportunity, because the further you go, the better the opportunities you have to let go of. So you have to say no to some really cool and awesome things. And that gets harder. It's easy in the beginning when people are just trying to sort of take advantage of, I don't know, whatever platform you have, for example. It's easy to turn that down. But once the opportunities become really good, it gets harder and harder. But one thing I do is my phone is basically dead. It's mute. It's always on mute, basically. No real notifications, nothing pops up. I always keep it face down somewhere else where I can't access it. That really helps in the morning. And other than that, it's once I get going and once I get into the flow, writing is enough fun to sort of keep me there. But of course, it's always easy to get sucked into some rabbit hole. But I'm also trying to account for that. So, for example, if I'm researching something and I'm going way deeper with the research for the article about some character, some historical figure, reading the whole Wikipedia article, I think that's actually fine because that's the kind of research that also drives creativity. And I don't know what might fall onto the page as a result of me reading that article later. Right. I think that's okay. And that's the kind of procrastination I want to make room for. Whereas other procrastination, just being stuck in my inbox for 2 hours,
doesn't help anything.
I have to be really careful about.
And one thing actually, a lot of questions I want to ask here. So you've jumped around on a lot of different topics as a writer.
Yes.
And, that is, you picture someone like Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan. Some people jump around every few years, let's say, like Malcolm Gladwell. Every 4 years, he might jump around to a topic, where some people jump around. Every article is on a very different topic. How do you feel about the choices you've made there, following your curiosity, which maximizes your fun, but maybe you're not known for, hey, the world top expert in X?
I think that it's probably hard to know in advance when you start out. But if you know you have the long-term vision of being an author, writer, very focused on the creative part, then I think that's not a big problem if you don't have this niche, this expertise, and if it takes a few years, if you're doing it sort of the slow way. I think I was writing about habits a lot for a while, and I got some reputation, I think, relatively early on for that. But then I diverged, especially after Quora. I was answering questions all over the place. But for me, because I wasn't in a rush, just so to speak, to monetize, especially at first, and that definitely helps. So when you want to monetize, especially, that helps, I think, early on to have a niche and be known for something. And if you have something you're very passionate about and you feel like you have a lot of things to say about, that might be also easier for you. So I think in terms of money, it's probably the more profitable route. But for me, for example, I was covering productivity a lot early on. And after 5 or 6 mega posts, I felt like I ran out. I had my system down. I had nothing to say at the time. And I could have kept coming up with things, but it felt kind of fake because I wasn't using them.
So for you, you mentioned something there that you had your system down. So for you, are you writing articles that can apply to your life as well as part of what makes it fun for you? That it's not just purely teaching other people. It's like, hey, I want to research this article on productivity because I'm struggling with this part of it.
Yes, I think that's why productivity was one of the first topics I was drawn to as well, because I hadn't really read a lot of books on that topic or anything of the sort. And from getting into knowing Tim Ferriss, his whole 80-20 thing, approach that he had to everything, and learning about habits. And so I tried to just piece together my own little system for what works. And I did, and I ended up sharing that along the way. So there was definitely let me go out and do something that I can actually write about that has some substance. Because especially in the beginning, and if you're not practiced, if you don't have the discipline yet, you can't it's much harder at least to sit down and just come up with something on the blank page, which now I have more confidence on. People always ask me, where do you get all the ideas? And I say, well, usually I have a folder full of ideas. Like I have more ideas than I can ever write about. But even if so, I can, if I sit down long enough and stare at the page, something's going to come up, and then I'll just write about that. But in the beginning, especially, it really helps when you feel you have your first dry slump or whatever, and you feel like, okay, I can just go out, I can do something, and then I can come back and report on it.
Yeah. So I think one thing, I'm taking away from you, and I think very similarly, is like if you have a long-term perspective, that makes a really big difference. And most people don't. So if you're going to give up really quickly, if you have a long-term perspective, even if you're not going the absolute fastest way, doesn't really matter, because long term you end up in the same place. But on some level, and I ask this because I'm thinking about this for myself, I've written a lot of articles on learning how to learn. And now, I'm thinking about how to do a book around that and how to combine the articles and things like that. In retrospect, knowing what you know now, of course, you had to do everything you did to get where you are now. So and you're happy with yourself, so you can't regret it. But would you have created a book once you've done all these articles on productivity and habits? Would you have written a book on it and be like, okay, now I'm going to combine those into an article and then move on?
I don't think so. funny thing is, one of the first things I did was write a book. Actually, it was super technical. It was about Googling,
Oh, I didn't know
because
that.
I started an article series about how to Google, because I was just trying. It was around productivity. I was trying to share helpful things, and I was like, man, if only everyone knew how to Google, because I find myself thinking so often, you can Google the answer to this in 2 seconds. And if you know how to Google, and especially how to go deep into Google and find very specific things, you're just going to accelerate your own learning so much. And
Yeah,
so,
it's so true. I mean, most people, it's one of those categories of things that people are like, I know how to Google. Like, why should I read a book on Googling? But then, no, like, there's actually
yeah,
a
yeah,
huge
yeah,
difference in your life. Okay, so you're working on
yeah.
this book, and
Yeah, I started as an article series, and then it got so long and expensive. I was like, oh, this should actually be like a small self-published book, and I did that. I was writing like crazy for a week, had all these screenshots and stuff, and I did self-publish it. I think it was in 2014 still, so it was one of the very earliest things that I've done. And of course, totally bombed. I had no audience. The cover was terrible. I made it myself, so there was a lot of marketing lessons learned there. But
how many books did you sell at that point?
Jesus, a handful of copies, five to
Okay.
10 or something.
Okay, so not a lot. Interesting.
Yeah. And and then I dialed back really hard on the whole book thing, and I started thinking a lot more about it. And now, I mean, so many books published, like at least 1 million, I think, of traditionally published ones, let alone the self-published ones every year, right? And after that, I've never really felt this. I have this killer idea, whether it's a concept like the 5-second rule or a miracle morning, these very grippy concepts people come up with, where you're like, this is something I can really make into a book, and the book helps drive the initial concept home, even if the concept can be explained in a blog post, but the book sends a bigger message.
Yeah.
And I haven't had that until this point, but so that's why I was now going, I want to start with self-publishing books. I want to start with the more what you said. So I have a lot of content on certain topics, so let me try to bundle some up in a cool way. It's going to be a short book, it's going to be cheap, mostly for my audience, and if it ends up taking off or leading to a bigger book, that's fine. But not to this traditional book, big scale kind of effort, where I feel like I have to let that come to me, and I still haven't had this like, oh man, this has to be a nonfiction traditional bestseller or whatever.
Really interesting. So for you, you feel like a good time to go into books was, number one, you have a much higher skill set a few years later. You have a larger audience, and then you really found a hook that you feel like can really work. And how, there's always a tension between, people who follow you have already read a lot of your articles. How much are you starting from scratch versus how are you taking articles and just gluing them together, or how are you thinking about going up to that next level?
So with the first one of the topics I ended up covering over time a lot was self-love or self-validation, confidence, whatever you want to call it, but looking in the mirror and feeling good about yourself, not smug, but good.
Yeah.
And so I have a whole bunch of articles, and I just tried to collect all the articles I had, 20, 30, 40, that were sort of related to the topic. And now I'm just trying to put structure to it and have the book sort of tell its own story, work the articles into this story in the ones that work, but then also do adapting, editing, maybe do bridges, segues between the articles. So I'm thinking of it like a essay or blog post compendium, which I think most books are nowadays anyways. And that's the format also you want to keep the reader's attention. You can't do this if you're not doing novels, at least. It's very hard to have like very dense pages of dense material.
I was going to ask you about that is, I'm thinking about the learning book and around the 5-hour rule. And it's like, on the one hand, there's like a Malcolm Gladwell style of storytelling, which I don't do in articles. I more give a quick summary of like the big ideas, but he's more like, and the researcher like was born here, and then they grew up, and then they became really fascinated in this idea. And then they did this study, and here's the design of the study, and here's like one of the participants in the study. So there's a huge storytelling around one study. And I feel like it's a little bit easier to do that in an article or in a book format versus so what I'm asking is, are you going to change your writing at all? Or I feel like what I heard you say is you actually know you're going to keep it still in the article style because people appreciate those short, get to the point ways of doing it.
I think for this first effort that I'm trying, where it's basically stitching articles together, but also really thinking about how that translates into a book as a different format. Because I know a book and article is very different context. And some people you can throw just articles in a book as a collection, but then there's pieces missing, sort of bridges between the pieces and so on are missing that the reader can't walk over kind of. So I'm really trying to make a big effort with the editing and everything. so that it actually feels like a whole book.
Right. It doesn't feel.
But in terms of style, I think I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep it where it is. So also have subheads between the articles, so there's shorter sections and then
visuals, so people can like pop in if they're waiting in line on their Kindle and get something valuable. Then, if it's okay if they leave it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been wrestling with that. There's like the I have the 4-Hour Body book here somewhere, but I feel like that was a very interesting design book where it's very modular. Each chapter could be a small book on its own right. And it's very, you don't need the previous chapter to understand that chapter. So that's one way of writing. And another way of writing is really building up on top of each other. The first book is making the case for this huge thing. And then the second half is more about how to. How are you kind of drawing those lines?
I think mine is, because it's going to be about self-love as a concept, I'm going to try to have some very brief definition, a story that kind of makes the definition and makes a case for it. What is this? Why is it important? How do you get it? Why is it more of a behavior rather than a trait? And just clear up some misconceptions and try to set like the concept itself. And then the rest is going to be connected stories that help you with certain aspects of implementing this concept into your life, but very story driven, like the articles, sort of leading with different examples, different stories. And then where it becomes a sort of passive thing where I feel like I want it to be a book where, first of all, you can read random pages, you can read subsections, and there's a little story in there, and that makes you feel good about satisfying your curiosity, that kind of. But then also, if you read the whole book in either one go or in slow doses, kind of, then you start feeling better about yourself. So it's not necessarily a super practice driven, super do this exercise, do that exercise. It's more something like a book that when you close it and you put it down, you feel a little better about yourself. You feel good about your day.
I like that way of, interesting. It's interesting that, going on, I feel like it's the publishing industry is getting to a point now where somebody like you don't, and Niklas Goeke too, is, you're going more the self-publishing route. You don't need the credibility of a major publisher. And that also creates more room for creativity. You don't have to do a book that's 212 pages, that's on the shelf of Amazon or of Barnes & Noble, something like that. So how do you think about almost this new format of these shorter books? How long is it? How much are you going to charge for it? Is your plan to, how often are you going to create these in your mind?
So I haven't thought about everything, right? But I can tell you what I thought about so far, which is that I don't know how long it's going to be, but I think it might be around 30 essays, and I don't know, total might be 150 pages, maybe 100. I guess also depends on which format you're going to get it in. But I don't think it's going to be a super long book, and I'm also not trying to make it artificially long. And I'm thinking about charging, at least for the digital version, making it super cheap, sort of this mass market paperback idea where it costs $2-3, where you get it. And then if you think it's really good, you're like, I can't believe this costs $3.
Right.
So this is really good value for $3. And it's easy to sort of share and pass on. Sort of maybe like you would find a very meaty or like long blog post where someone explains a more technical concept in great detail, and it just takes a lot of space, but in a more inspirational, creative form. And I think I'm going to do that. And I have ideas for, I think, 5, 6, 7 of those books, looking at the topics and the articles that I have. We'll see. I don't know how often I can put them together, but maybe try to do one every 3 months or once or twice. How it goes.
That's awesome. And how are you thinking about, there's always a balancing of what mediums one publishes on, what formats and what platforms, because there's a trade-off that the more time you spend on book writing, you're going to have less time to do medium. And, a lot of people, they might jump from one platform to another too soon. And there's always a learning curve for each platform. How are you thinking about with yourself of, okay, I'm going to stop writing somewhere else less? And then how would you advise other people think about how long to focus on a medium or platform before switching?
I think that should mostly be a function of when did you start writing, how consistent are you with your writing habit, and how much deliberate practice have you done towards this whole, I could be a professional writer, I could charge for freelance clients for my articles. So you can do all of that. The first year, it doesn't matter if you spend it on 1 or 3 platforms, I think one might actually help you with the marketing aspects, understanding those, because it takes time to understand even one platform, and might also help you with the consistency and with getting better because you're catering to that platform's audience, whether it's Quora, Medium, Substack, something else. But and then after that first year or two, depending if you can find a rhythm and find consistency and find a regular habit, then you can maybe think more strategically about, if you haven't before, where do I want to be long term, and where do I want to sort of set up shop, and then also maybe just as an experimentation factor for your deliberate practice, go somewhere else and, for example, answer a bunch of Quora questions on top of writing Medium articles. I think you'll naturally find that sort of once you get somewhat bored with the existing framework that you have, because you're so consistent that you start to feel the routine literally becoming a bit boring. And then I think that's going to unfold on its own, kind of.
Yeah. And one thing that I think is interesting as a topic is voice and storytelling. I haven't done as much personal storytelling, and I always struggle with it. And I think I realized recently that one of the reasons I struggle with personal storytelling is when I feel like I'm researching or feeling an idea, I feel like I'm really understanding it better, and then I can apply it to my life selfishly. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I get bored with trying to think about my life or what was the interesting stories around there. And I look at what am I getting out of it? I guess I could see I'm rewriting my own story at some level. Every time you think about it, it changes it. But what makes personal storytelling fun for you? I'll start off with.
I think there's one of the things is the lesson. I think that was on Quora, because on Quora I learned that most nonfiction writing, or especially shorter pieces, answers, blog posts, should most often have a clear takeaway. And the way if you can provide that with your own example, that's just a powerful story that has the novelty factor that people haven't heard. So I think it starts there. What adds to it is that it helps me process my own story. I'm thinking about it again. I'm reflecting on it. I'm trying to learn something from it. So it has this meditative aspect to it. Then there's also learning how to manage that, because you don't want to come across as gloating or bragging. So it's sort of practicing, trying to stay humble in a way, also in your writing. Because if you're writing about someone else and that's a great person, it's very easy you can't say enough good things about them. But then when you're doing that with your own story, you don't want to look like you're touting your own horn.
And then when I was 16 years old, I made a momentous decision. That was okay. And so, but for me, I still gravitate towards other examples or case studies of other people.
Yep.
Is it ever, sometimes with our own story, it's hard to see ourselves from a third person perspective and be like, oh, this is an interesting story. Do you ever have that with yourself and how do you find those really interesting stories? Or is it not really about the most interesting story? It's how you tell it.
Sometimes it's about how you tell it, but I'm also not trying to force it. So I'm using a lot of examples. Some of my articles are just drawing together different examples that none of which are me to make a point. And I found that important and also fun at some point. And I think that's also where I started. At the beginning, it was less personal, then it became a little more personal. And then I have phases where I write more personal stories and less, depending on how much happens in my life and so on. Because I'm not trying to force it and pull the example for something from everywhere, because I can't, right? Not every, like, you don't have experiences for everything, and relevant and fun experiences also all the time. So I'm not trying to force it. And it's more retroactive, I think. So if it fits the post, and if I make a headline, for example, or I want to write about this topic, and then something immediately comes to mind, or as I'm researching and thinking about it, something comes back to my mind, some memory, then I'll see if I can include it in a meaningful way, but not trying super hard to force these in there.
Are there any questions you ask yourself to, beyond, okay, what are stories that relate to this topic? It sounds like it's at a gut level. You just, did anything come to mind? But I was curious in the beginning, is there a process you used to, James Altucher, everyone has a different voice too. James Altucher is like, when was I about to like give up on life basically? Yep. Or like, he looks for those stories. I did a year of experimenting with vulnerability, and it didn't work on multiple levels for me. I actually felt like it finding those stories over and over made me more aware of them and like change my self-identity in a negative way.
Okay.
I'm curious how you think about it. I think once in a while those stories are good. That's what I took away from me personally, but every day is
right. And did you do some? Did you have a practice for it? Did you do some journaling or something, and then try to write about them in an article like you would share publicly, or what was that process for you?
I did a year challenge where I just wanted to, I had read Brené Brown on vulnerability and James Altucher, and I wanted to just get better at having my own voice and experimenting with that. And so I made a commitment to write once a day on Facebook and to make, spend like an hour and to do something that felt really deeply true to me, but also like walking the line of maybe sharing more than one would normally share as well.
Right.
And
interesting.
I think I just focused on like, here are the things I've done wrong or things like that versus, that. And I think I could have shared, I think sometimes it's good to share on things you did right as well, so it's like, you can't go too far on the humble side as well. So it's always a balance.
For sure. Yeah. So you don't end up beating up yourself in public kind of all the time. And then that's going to have negative, like reflect negatively on like your day-to-day frame of mind.
Yeah.
Interesting. For me, the vulnerability part is, of course, there's always this question of, should I share this? How much should I share here? Am I a little afraid to hit publish? And some writers like James Altucher are very hard on that spectrum, and they feel like they don't publish if they don't think there might be some negative repercussions or something. For me, it's never been like that. Just as writing as I went on, I felt also the bigger the audience grows, the bigger the responsibility to be honest and to try to hold yourself accountable and not talk about things that you, for example, have no clue about, lie to the audience, things like that. So I think that's also the piece where the accountability to the audience is one part where the vulnerability came in, where at some point I was like, I have to share this story. And because otherwise people might think something of me that ends up not being true if I don't say this now, right? If I don't speak up about this now.
Right.
So there's that to it. But then the process of sort of finding the stories and the examples, now it's very gut feeling driven. And same as with the productivity system that I had in the beginning, the further I went on, the less of these structural things I felt I needed. It's very natural for me to want to write and wake up and want to write something and share something. So I always try to come up with some intro, lead the story in a way, whatever comes to mind and feels like it's a good angle, like it could work. And then just naturally, as I tell the story, weave in what comes to mind. And sometimes there's big gaps there, right? I put away the story for a day or two. I research some other things, and that ends up flowing in there. Sometimes it's all in one go. But now it's very gut driven. I used to have an Evernote, and I saved a lot of articles, saving YouTube videos, and so on. But now it's much more a reflection of whatever currently comes up. But I also do have a big stack at this point of stories and examples that I can draw on, because
from
you also read a lot
collected.
Yeah.
Are they almost like there's like for me, the reader, maybe it feels like you have a new story every day, but maybe for you, maybe there's like 30 stories that really illustrate a lot of the key things you believe in, and you keep going back to those stories. Is it like that?
Yeah, definitely. And I can sort of see or trace these stories by which examples come up more often. So there's certain people that I've used or talked about multiple times. So when it's the 80-20 example, it's the origin story of Pareto, the founder that I've talked about, the man who came up with the concept that I've shared on multiple times. And then a lot of the early writers I read that I keep coming back to, also to sometimes to see their progression. How have they evolved over the years? And what's now a new example about this person that I can share? What's a new angle on an old story? I draw a lot from movies. I love movies, TV shows, books, stories from books.
When you share a movie, I haven't done, actually, I just did maybe for the first or second time referenced a movie, and I'm always thinking like, sometimes people, if you watched it and people love that TV show like you did, then it's great. But then a lot of people didn't. Is there a way you think about and how effective of those? Do people really resonate with movie examples and TV shows?
One of my biggest articles ever was about Man of Steel, Superman. So a movie that's sort of popular in the sense that it has a big audience because it's a pop culture, very big, iconic DC comics kind of movie in that sense. So there's a good chance that a lot of people have seen it and have liked it. But on the other hand, it's also a sort of could feel like a cheesy kind of reference to make, but it was very built around it. And
that's right. I feel cheesy a lot when I'm thinking about like a movie thing. It feels like it's making it less serious almost.
And for me, the challenge or the fun part there was always, how can I translate enough of this movie to give this lesson I want to give, which might or might not be related to the movie at all. So it's usually if it's a lesson that is, so the Superman article was about self-improvement and its negative effects on you being too self-aware, too like self-indulgent, too competitive, and so on. And Superman was the example because he's Superman, so no one can touch him. And it was related to the movie, but then not a lesson that's explicitly in the movie, right? So I'm not retelling something that the movie already tells you. Yes.
It's like you're hiring him as a character to be in your story, kind of. You're casting him.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. So use the character to tell a different story. And at the same time, how can I provide enough background context of the movie in writing? So basically, how could I, if I would write this movie as a story, as an article, how would I do that? And then so I try to do some of that, set the scene, explain what the characters do, and sort of like a movie script, but more expansive, I guess, more like a novel maybe. Do a little bit of that. And that is just fun, trying to like translate big movies or parts of big movies onto the screen in a blog post. And then how can that character teach us a lesson that we didn't expect from that character maybe?
Really interesting. I know that there's going to be a lot of variance between it, but for me, I almost looked at it as casting, like let's say Elon Musk or these people that's like a celebrity, you know, but I've never tried a character. How, when you use those sorts of characters, do you feel like in general, those are like, you can count on people being interested in that? Or is it one of your main quivers in your arrows?
I think so. I think I do. I use movies a lot, also just quotes or little scenes. So they might also play little roles. It's not always a fully structured after a movie kind of thing, but those have been pretty reliable. And I don't know if it's a reflection of the movies I pick, because I love movies. So I watch a lot of movies. So I have a decent grasp of what are movies people are going to like and what are the aspects people might not like about those movies. But generally, I feel like those are doing well, because usually the characters in movies, they're somewhat overdrawn, right? So that they serve the movie, so you can clearly see the good guy is the good guy, the bad guy is the bad guy. They're not as
It's like archetypal almost.
Yeah, exactly. So you can rely on making certain points with the characters because the character is just a stronger version of what maybe the real human was. I guess we do that with humans also, right? If we use popular figures, celebrities, or we focus on one aspect of the story and we kind of overemphasize or just emphasize that part of their story because we want to make a point with it. And in the reader's mind, they also
become really. Yeah. And are there any books or resources on storytelling, and particularly online storytelling, that you found really helpful?
So sticking with the movie part, there's a lot of YouTube channels doing movie analysis. I think there's lessons from the screenplay. There is, I think the channel is called Storytellers, people doing video essays about movies. So they take scenes from the movie, they narrate it, they have some music, and they make a bigger point about it. I think there's one.
Interesting.
There's one, how to become an artist, or how to become a professional artist, or it's basically about Steven Pressfield's concept of resistance and being a pro as a creative, and then it uses creative movies about writers basically to make that point, and that's been really compelling. So I like those.
Interesting.
In terms of books, generally Steven Pressfield is good for artists, creativity for artists and inspiration and so on. This whole art of war of art and so on. These books are great. I love Steven Pressfield, but he also has more technical ones about. Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit, I think one is called, which is very technical about storytelling.
Okay, I didn't know about them. I get that one.
Yeah, so that's been really good. I have one that I haven't started yet. It's called Long Story Short. I like books on screenwriting as well. Save the Cat by Blake Snyder.
Yeah, I have that. I haven't read it though. Have you found that those books actually really help you become better at storytelling, or you feel like most of it has been native? just a practicing and repetition?
It's helped me a lot. I mean, I think you've also written about it, even Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey, that concept. And that's like one of the biggest concept probably in storytelling when it comes to theory. But movies, because movies are a really good analogy, and thus also screenwriting and scripts, because online, like you said, it's a attention starved place. So you really have to work hard to keep the reader's attention. And movies do great with that because they're a visual medium, and they also have to service that. It's the same thing. When I'm watching a video on TikTok nowadays, if you don't get me in the first 2 seconds, I'm also gone. So, and movies do really well with that. So the concepts, and especially the archetypes, the stereotypes, types of movies,
That's
Golden
true.
Fleece,
Out of any
hero's
industry,
journey.
like if you look at, like maybe you go to East Asia countries for people who meditate. And if you're looking for people who sell stories, you go to movies and Hollywood and TVs and learn from them.
Yeah.
Kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, pretty much. So definitely would recommend those books. I only take parts of it, usually the more general parts and not the specifics of script writing or whatever, but the general concepts are usually pretty solid.
And, another thing that's interesting, I notice a lot of people in our course are really interested in having their own voice. And I've really gotten to think about what is voice. At the surface level, it might be like, hey, I'm writing about this topic and I use humor once in a while. But I feel like at a more fundamental level, it's actually the things that you're curious about and willing to put time into researching something random that no one else is. Or when you see an event, like a scene in a movie or something happen in the world, you have a unique point of view on it because of your life experiences that you can share with other people. But it can be hard to find your voice that's unique, that will stand out. How do you think about how people who are starting can get started with finding their voice from scratch, and then how you went through that?
For as much writing as I've done, I still find it hard to differentiate between voice and style, first of all. So my gut feeling is style is a little more about grammar and how you're being like tactical with your words, long sentences, short sentences, and so on. But that also already goes into your voice. So
I think there's an overlap too. It's like it can even be medium or length of the post or post style format.
Are you long-winded or not? Are you funny or not? Are you sarcastic on paper or not? Do you make jokes in writing or not? And so on. So it's always a very fuzzy concept, first of all, right? So I think the first thing is that it's okay to not have a 3-sentence pitch for what your voice is. And for me, how I went through it, I think I started with this common advice, write like you talk. And that did really well for me in the beginning. It doesn't do so much for me now. And my writing has become a lot more intellectual. And it's been a sort of an uphill battle for me to let myself do that and appreciate that and not hide it, so to speak. Because the internet is full of write like you talk kind of advice, and because copywriting informs a lot of other writing too nowadays, because again, attention, you have to sell your writing and you have to do that well. But I think it's also overdone to the point where if you use big words, so to speak, right? If you have a big vocabulary, if you make longer sentences, if you write longer paragraphs, people might quickly attack you for it. But then other people really love that because they enjoy the type of reading. And I also feel your writing is on a pretty high level, also academically and from that perspective. And I personally I've always enjoyed that, right? So and many others have, right? Given the audience you've built, so I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, and it's easy to fall into that trap. But in the beginning, it definitely helps because it's just easier to get stuff out. So write like you talk, you just start typing literally and then you naturally let yourself go to a more structured, focused writing style over time. If you find that's you.
Yeah, so I like that. That was actually, I remember my 10th grade teacher, I was having trouble with writing. Definitely was not my best subject. And she said, hey, Michael, you're great at talking. You talk normally. I think she was just making that up. I think she was just trying to give the advice, but I believed it at the time. And she's like, just write like you talk. And that really did help at the time as well. Yeah. Interesting. So I also feel like voice is, it's something, it's almost like an emergent or a result of making decisions based off of just iterating, based off of your own, what interests you. And I feel like you start to lose your voice if you're iterating based only off of too much off of what the market wants and you think the market wants. And as a consequence of naturally iterating, like for me, I went towards research, I went towards longer. I kind of just started, oh, this feels right. I'm going to move in that direction more.
Yep. I started, so first of all, I noticed that my voice or style or whatever you want to call it, it changes every 6 to 12 months. It makes a big shift, I feel like. That's only in hindsight after the third or fourth year did I start observing this, where, wow, if I look back 6 months from now, I can barely recognize the sound of this. If I read this out loud versus reading a current article out loud, such a big difference. And so I think it happens gradually for sure. I think boredom might also play a role in that. That you just get bored with how you say things, so you want to mix things up, you want to try something new.
Yeah.
On the positive side, I find every sort of new style or voice or whatever you want to call it that I add to the roster somehow ends up in my quiver, and I can pretty reliably at least draw on it. So obviously you get rusty the less you use that style, but I feel like I can always come back to it. And if I practice a little and write 2-3 articles, I could get something out really good in that style if someone, for example, asked me for it. Which is good, again, if you want to be professional at some point and do freelancing or whatever, that's a good thing to have, because you say, well, I can write in this style or in this style, or like, what do you want? Do you want it to be casual and write like you talk-ish kind of? Do you want it to be more research and academical? So you also have this portfolio of voices also to some extent.
Right.
So there's obviously the main one used, but there's also, you're building up and I think you're not losing too much. If you can go back to where you were. If you need to for some reason.
And I feel like there's I'm trying to think of a better word, but anti-fragility, that there's all these platforms that are rising and emerging and ways of, connecting with people online. And so I happen to watch YouTubers. I'd like to make the excuse that it's because of my son. He loves watching YouTubers, but I find it just, It's one of those things that guilty pleasures. But I noticed that all of them go through breakdowns because they're overproducing too much for themselves, or they've already mined all their personal stories and they reach a point where it's like, well, what's personal, professional? And then also another big tension is, they started on one platform and then that platform changes its rules. We have this in our Slack group with Medium and other platforms. And so you get frustrated by that platform. And then, most people don't make the jump. So if they're a YouTube star, they stay there. But then some people are able to become every new platform, like Gary Vaynerchuk is an example. They're just find a way to alter their voice to fit that. So they're not just, oh, I only do long form video. You can do short-term quotes or articles, animations.
Yes, and if you write long enough, I think that also naturally happens. Once again, because you're bored and you want to try new things, but that's also, again, you also have this huge advantage. For example, Quora for me was like that. I think it definitely helped what I had built so far, that I could figure out a style and a voice and a framework that works on that platform relatively quickly. Much quicker than I would have if I had started from scratch on Quora.
I think online, I'm jumping topics here. I think online writing is a really fascinating space to me. It has many of the qualities of software. In other words, you could write an article and it can reach millions of people, just one article. It's crazy. And also what's cool is that you don't have to have like software bugs to fix or things like that. And so if you really get good at doing this, you could reach a huge amount of people without spending more and more time. And I feel like there hasn't really been much of a practice developed about it. Like in software, there's a whole funding ecosystem of going from like angels to VCs. Lean startup has become really big, and like here's how you test your idea and grow it. And with writing, there's not as much of like, here are the different skill sets, like even just basic specialization and how to develop those. So, and also I'll share the final thing I've just been noticing is that there's more and more monetization ways to do it. And so more people are doing it as a career. And a lot of people who are successful as online writers now aren't necessarily the people who are the best magazine writers. It's a new crop of people. So my question for you is, how do you picture where we are right now in the online writing space? And since you want to be in this in the long term, how do you see it evolving?
Oh, that's a big question. I agree with you on the aspect that it's really multiple skill sets, and being a writer is sort of also being an entrepreneur automatically, kind of. This part where I think few people can manage this whole, I'm going to build a writing habit, I'm going to have my routine, I'm going to ship articles like crazy, and the articles are going to take care of, everything is going to take care of itself because the articles spread, and then I have some simple monetization around it. I think very few people do that. A lot of them will do freelancing, work on other projects, and so on. So there is a lot that goes into it, and I try to basically distinguish between certain archetypes. So there's the book writer, the author. So this more, whether it's traditionally published or self-published or both, where you're very focused on books, because then your timeline to ship the next thing is just a lot bigger.
Right. You still might do articles, but the book is the core thing.
Yep. And then there's more the freelance model, where you do more contracting. There's the marketing model where you do a lot more copywriting and sort of writing as a marketing skill, because it's everywhere. Everything is written, actually. If you think about it, movies are written. That's also why I think everything comes back to writing one way or another.
That's a good
movies
point.
are written, songs are written, music is written on notes on paper. So there's nothing
point.
that doesn't
I actually
really...
never... so basic, but yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Language, communication, talks are written, TED Talks, slides, and so on, everything. So there's people doing more the marketing parts of it. And then there's this last sort of artist kind of Renaissance artist kind of idea, which I think you also talked about at the expert generalist, right?
Yeah.
As like a way of learning and building your skill set and looking at the world. I think also in terms of monetization and where you want to be if you want to be an online writer long term, where you have patrons, basically fans funding your work directly and using that as a base for everything else. And you can build everything else around it. And now you could literally do this with one paid newsletter. If it's a good email newsletter, you have 1,000 people paying $5 a month. That's a full-time income. Of course, it takes time to build towards that. But I think the basis for setting this up, this I'm getting paid for my writing my work directly, has never been better in terms of options and ways to do that, ways to enact that. And
there's so many different platforms and ways to monetize.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who actually want that, they spend a lot of time in the other, like freelancing, marketing, and they don't really see it as a possibility yet, because it's still kind of nascent, because these platforms have been, Medium Partner Program has been around for 3 years. That's nothing compared to the scope of things. Even the internet itself is relatively young. I think maybe a little more than half of people are online, but what's going to happen when 100% of the world is online? So the whole thing is only getting bigger. Also, of course, more competitive, more noisy, but I think the framework for doing that is really good. And once you have something like that established, I think even for me, it's very hard to embrace that sort of, it's not going to go away. It's very hard. It feels very weird to sort of not have a day job. So I'm trying to sort of mentally still like get there myself. But I think it is going to be this way. The internet itself as a place with opportunity for writing to make money is going to stay around. So once you have some base, I think that's going to be good. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it. So writing as entertainment, so to speak, especially with this whole automation, AI, these kinds of trends happening, where there's universal basic income is a big discussion. If people who drive trucks don't need to drive trucks anymore.
Yeah. A huge number of people
I think
want
the need
to
for
write.
entertainment. Yeah. And I think the need for entertainment, writing as entertainment, or like for learning entertainment, everything it does usually combined is only going to go up, because more prosperity brings more leisure time. So I think it's actually, the opportunity is getting bigger, not smaller.
Yeah, and I feel like, if social media has taught us anything, in 1999 it was weird to put a photo online. Now there's billions of people, willingly just putting stuff online every day. So it just seems like it's almost like a fundamental need is to share who you are, your stories, what you've learned, or just your point of view, or something you thought was funny online with other people, other human beings.
Yeah, and I think it's also going to get more compartmentalized, in the sense that you don't need people say this now, you don't need a big audience to make a living. There's this whole Kevin Kelly 2008 1,000 True Fans article. Yep. That's all you need to make a living and so on. And I think that's also going to become more. I mean, there's everything online now, from people building Hot Wheels sets to and people just love watching them that build the Hot Wheels sets and play with it and so on.
That's really funny.
Knitting, all kinds of things. And the same is going to happen with writing. New topics keep coming up. And,
there's kind of like this, it's like this, it falls under this rubric of working with the garage door open. You know, my son used to love Legos. He used to have like one room in the house just for Legos, and he'd watch people building Lego videos and then narrating. You know, from the outside, I didn't grow up with that. So it's just funny to like think about watching someone building something Legos. But now he watches Minecraft videos. And so it's almost,
oh yeah.
And it took me so long to get that of like, why would you watch someone playing a game? Why wouldn't you just play it yourself? Or, and what you were saying with like, could be knitting. It's like, there's working with the garage door open as a concept is interesting.
Yep. That's, that sounds really, you just go about your if writing is your passion, and you just have to be willing to put some of it out there. And if somehow what else you do, your hobbies, your interests, your voice, what you learn on your job, whatever it is, it all comes together in your writing in a way that interests people. Some people will be drawn in, and it's going to have to be less and less people that you need in terms of size with the audience to make a decent living from it, if you so desire. And then you can still try to become a very big author or not. That's totally sort of up to you. But I think writing as sort of a small scale freelance career, an independent one where it's not about the contracting and doing work for corporations and stuff, I think that's only going to get bigger and more opportunity there, which is, I think, pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel like there's some risk of, if you're working for someone else or a publication, it limits your ability to have your own voice. And especially if the way that publication is monetizing is based on ads, it creates incentives that ultimately just hurt you long term in building your own following. And so I feel like one thing that you and I have in common, or Niklas Cole, you got some of the people first interviews, so that's why I keep on mentioning you guys together, but is this long term orientation, and it's for yourself, and you're just building up momentum, you're building up skills, you're building up followers across platforms, you're getting smarter, your voice is evolving. And I feel like, to me, that's an asset, which gives me the feeling of stability that, you know, all the time I invest in research, I have this base of knowledge now where I can have all these degrees of freedom that someone who isn't reading the same things and as much can't even think those thoughts because they aren't aware of it. How do you think about what sets you apart as like someone who's really as a feedback loop that's building momentum versus someone else who might be like, they might have found one thing that resonated, but then they kind of disappear when that thing goes out of vogue? This is like, if it were like tech conversation, it'd be like your competitive advantage, or what's your sustainable competitive advantage?
Right. I think one thing I think Gary Vaynerchuk prides himself in a lot is that he's always experimenting, and he says like I'm willing to lose attention in one place because I'm already busy trying to figure out a new one. And I feel, at least to some extent, I've done that with my projects where I was writing, the fact that I kept moving from Quora. So it's as much an advantage as it might be a disadvantage to not stick with the platform. And because I sort of forced myself to always figure out new platforms, figure out new styles, new ways of storytelling, new ways to reach a different audience in a different place. I think that's definitely helped. I try to draw that from artists. It's like if it's Madonna or Bob Dylan, who's if he doesn't get booed off stage once in a decade or something, he's doing something wrong. So to keep trying, making new things, changing things up. And whenever I fall into a routine, whether it's on Medium directly, for example, with my posts, I try to step back a little and think, what can I do differently here? How do I want to shift? Whether it's what I talk about or writing more long form content again, or things like that. So I do a lot of experimentation.
Yeah, one thing I hear, and I want to hear more, I just want to reflect what I heard back. Something I heard is, number one, you just have this consistency over a long period of time, but also, and maybe it's driven by avoidance of boredom and just wanting to have fun and be on purpose, is you're constantly trying out new voices, new skills, platforms, mediums. And so there's consistency plus experimentation over a long period of time. It's almost like you're evolving faster than the market's evolving.
Yeah, so I think with that, you're always a little bit ahead of the curve in the sense that you might be trying a new format that's going to become really popular later, but you're also behind in maximizing what you currently know works, because you can't do as much of that. So there's some drawbacks to it, but I find, especially in the long run, if you look at it on a very long time scale, because on a very long time scale, the experimentation part is also necessary because platforms change, like you said, every single day. So you can't just exploit one tactic or one type of post or whatever. It never lasts. So there's not too much opportunity cost when you say, okay, I'm actually going to just keep experimenting all the way through pretty much. But yeah, I think that those are the two big things for me. I think of like any successful creative career, maybe any career even, I don't know, because which career is not creative these days, is this whole consistency first, and then you add experimentation on top of it. So once you're consistent, you add experimentation, whether it's like on a small scale, on a bigger scale, but you always have some sort of experimentation going.
Yeah, I really view it literally that exact same way at a fundamental level. It's just about those two things. And sometimes people make it too complicated, but I talk to people in our courses and writing too, is like people want to have it perfect beforehand, or it's harder than I thought for a lot of people to actually go from 0 to 1 and to start posting online and consistently. And literally that's all, you just got to do it. It's like the necessary thing that if you're actually not posting online, like, and getting, improving, then nothing really else really matters.
Yep, that's true. Yeah. I have a lesson in my course. It's called "Nothing Else Matters," and it's like the Metallica song. It's literally like that. Have the consistency of showing up online in public with some accountability, and then everything follows from there. Still have to experiment and reinvent yourself constantly. But those two, are very, very the basic concepts, and that's also pretty much all you need to know and do. It's still hard to obviously do and build the habits and so on. There's no way around that, but from a core understanding perspective, those are the two main things to it.
Yeah. Are there other we've also talked about in terms of mindset, like long-term, focus. One thing I think has maybe come natural that it's so obvious to us that we don't say it, but I mean, being willing to, well, you said experiment, but being willing to fail publicly, I think it's a hard thing.
Yep.
Is there anything else that you feel like is a unique mindset to you, or what it required to be successful as an online writer? Oh, I think you froze. Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go. Good. I'm not really sure, but for this whole posting in public piece, what I can say to that is that I think Noah Kagan talks about it with marketing, that he doesn't feel like it's marketing if he's really excited about the product. It's like he's telling his friends about a cool thing that he really wants to share with them. And I think with writing, it's similar. If you're really excited about what you're talking about, or what you wrote about, what you believe in, if you think it's going to help people, then that really helps to overcome the whole fear of, okay, I might get judged for this. And that fear gets less and less the more you do it. So at one point, it just becomes very natural to publish and not really worry about comments and so on. But especially in the beginning, if you were excited to share this with a family member or a friend, close friend, then I think that can really help push people over this fear of, oh, I'm going to be judged for this.
Yeah, that's one of my tests, especially in the beginning, is would I be excited to share this with a lot of people? Like, and if I'm not excited, then why would I publish it? I had the experience. I wrote a book when I was in college, and I did review it like 4 or 5 times, but I just knew it wasn't my best. But I was just like, all right, I just got to get this out to the world. And then I lived with it for 5 years as I was speaking, and I always just had this hit inside of me of like, I almost didn't want to tell people about it, or I had to like give a disclaimer that, okay, I wrote this a long time ago, versus taking the extra time up front would have made me more proud to share it and feel good about it.
Right. What did you ultimately end up doing with it? Is it just still out and now you're just like not using it anymore as a tool or?
Yeah, that I'm not. Published in 2003, believe it or not, and
Oh wow,
yeah,
wow.
and it's about student success, so I'm not really focused on that anymore.
Uh-huh.
So this is getting to like
Right.
the main last big category that I wanted to ask you about. Hooks is a really big thing online. And one thing you were mentioning earlier is about you start with the intro, it sounded like. The intro, I'll just say this. The intro is really important because people bounce really quickly if you're not hitting them. But I find the intro to be, I can get the titles right, but sometimes the intros are just take me longer. I have to write like 4 or 5 intros. What does your process for writing intros look like?
So with time, I don't know if that's actually true or if it's just perception, but I find intros getting more and more important. And of course, not as important as the headline. You have to work with what is the person going to see? Is that element going to be interesting to them? And then just work backwards from there. First line, second line, and so on.
Right. In other words,
but I've done so many headlines, reviewed so many headlines that.
Go ahead.
Yep. Sorry. Yeah, with the headlines, I feel to a point where I always come up with one as a working title, and then I always end up revisiting it at the end and reworking it. But I have decent level of confidence, and then this year, I think at some point I started, intros, and I think I started falling into some routine with my intros where I was like, these are not as grabbing as they can and should be to somehow tell the reader that this is worth keeping reading. What I'm trying to do nowadays is think super long and hard about the first sentence. And with Medium specifically, I go back a lot and look at how many people highlighted the first sentence. That's a little gauge that I started implementing. Is the first sentence highlightable? Is that something that punches you or kind of like grabs you by the collar and just draws you into the story where you're like, oh wow, that hit me kind of hard. And then because that gets you to invest the next 30 seconds to read the next few paragraphs. And then obviously as you expand more and more, it's natural. You also need some breathing room as a writer. You can't just constantly punch people because that also is exhausting with your sentences. But that's something, work really hard on the first line. Try to make the first line that's something that's either like memorable or surprising but in any form, strong, powerful.
How do you do that?
That's a good question. I think, so I think when I started doing this, I started with quotes. So
just
popular quotes. And quotes, quotes is beautiful nowadays because quotes are vetted. You can go to Goodreads and you can see which quotes people like the most, which quotes have the most likes. So you start there and then but then what you can do is you can start reworking the quote. So it starts with literally just rewriting it, but you use something like thesaurus to find synonyms, find new words. And over time, whether it's an insight on the topic that you have or the intro itself that you want to share, it's taking one fun fact or the punchline of the intro basically that you want to write, you take that and you put it up front, you put it on the top. And then basically you fill in the backstory afterwards. But definitely using
basically you're saying like innovate on the quote, synonyms, but maybe even the structure at some level. Still, it's actually your own quote, basically.
Yep. So either like make the quote your own if you can, and if you can in a way that's relevant to the story. But then the more you work with quotes, the more you find out ways to make your own stuff kind of quotable.
Right.
And then usually I try. So for example, if I'm leading the intro with a story, an example, I might want to jump into the story and do that really fast. So if from again like a movie or story perspective, what I want to do is I want to drop you in the middle of the action, not you're waking up in the morning in your bed. It's like if I'm dropping you, you're in the middle of a street and there's a parade around you and you're trying to situate yourself and figure out what's going on.
Yeah. One of my favorite examples of I have that rule with myself as well, but like I think about like the movie where the movie starts where those main characters just running frantically, they're running for their life, and you're like, what are they running towards or away from? And you could just tell there's fear, and then they look behind them and then you see somebody else chasing them and you're like, and you're like, why is that person chasing them? It's like each new thing like gives you more questions.
Yep.
Okay, so number one way is a quote that you can rework. Number two is a story where middle of the action, you start it in the middle of the action.
Mm-hmm. I think number three would be a lesson or takeaway that might be the main takeaway of the post or not, but that is just going to be a strong lead. So whether it's a fun fact or something you think is going to be new to people. So one of my more successful articles this year was about finding out who's smart in a conversation, kind of like trying to locate sort of smart people in conversations that you have at work, like who has valuable things to contribute and things like that. And then I think the opening sentence was, the easiest way to find intelligent people is to ask an easy question followed by a more complex one. And that was basically the whole strategy of the post. That just like I just gave it away. I just gave you basically the key to the house, and then I'm going to try to show you the backyard while you're here. So and then it just kind of developed from there with examples and so on. But it wasn't dancing around, no beating around the bush, no trying to like hide the big takeaway. Literally, the first sentence was it. You could close the article, but most people won't, because if you haven't heard the story and the concept, right, you want, okay, now cool, this sounds good, but what's the deal, right? So where's the context?
Yeah, I went through a period where I just, take a writer that I really liked, then take out all their intros and put it in a spreadsheet and notice patterns. And that was the ones I noticed. Mm-hmm. It could be a stat as well. It's just crazy stat that's like, you wouldn't believe. And then the whole article is explaining why that stat is true and what it means. But I like the metaphor of you give them the keys up front and then you show them the backyard.
The stat thing is also really great, especially, and that is one thing that I learned, I think, from Steven Pressfield's book and comes from movies. They always want to have a concept for the movie. So I think one of the Blake Snyder ones he talked about was Four Christmases. And I think it's about a newly wedded couple who goes to their in-laws, and the in-laws are four couples because both parents got divorced. And so they have to spend like their Christmas at these different places with all these sort of patched together kind of families, and while they're trying to make their own marriage last, right?
Right.
And so that was a new spin on something that is very common, like which Christmas movie comedy everyone knows, and then the romantic comedy also everyone knows. But this was put a new spin on it. And you can do the same thing with the stats and even your opening line. So for example, I forget where it's from, maybe a Tony Robbins book, but basically he made a comparison he tried to explain what is the difference between a million and a billion. And he did that by saying, if something happened 1 million seconds ago, it was 12 days ago. And if it happened 1 billion seconds ago, it was 32 years ago. Because the difference between 1 million and 1 billion is 1,000, it's more zeros. It's very hard to grasp for humans. But by providing this new angle of 12 days versus 32 years, so you're basically putting the reader on, I don't know, a mountain or a place, and you're kind of directing the gaze towards something in a new way that they've never looked at this before, even though they know it. They know 1 million, they know 1 billion, but they've never heard of it in perspective of in seconds and in time. And so that also usually really, really does well for intros.
Yeah, there's I went through a period where I found top online writers and then tried to interview them and ask for their models or paid for consulting. And one journalist talks about that as the nut graph, that I guess is a common term in journalism, but you have a quote or something with designed to give perspective. So if you're talking about an idea, it puts that idea in perspective so you could see. So if it's like ocean plastics or something, it's like about all the face masks add up to the size of Switzerland. This is how big of a deal it is.
Oh, yeah. Something like that. Yeah. Like what people do with visualizations also, right? When they, I don't know, someone visualizes the world's money supply and it becomes a stack that is the size of the Statue of Liberty or something like that. Where
exactly. You're doing that with ideas. All right. I feel like we really covered a lot of stuff in this 90 minutes. So just really, really grateful for your time, Nick. And I know you really guard it and how important it is. So for people who want to learn more about your work and follow your writing, learn about your course, where should they go online?
So the best place to read my writing is Medium, medium.com/@NGOEKE. But you can just Google Niklas, basically, Niklas you can Google that, or you can search that on Medium, and you'll probably find me. And I have a writing course, it starts with a free course, and then there's a paid bigger course afterwards with videos and stuff. And that's at writelikeA.pro. So writelikeA.pro.
Nice. And one thing, can you tell a little bit about your course? For my perspective as a student in your course, the habits, you really do a good job at going that fundamental component of all the different parts that go into a habit, because it's not just as simple as having the intention. There's dozens of things you can do.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. I'm always trying to learn how to structure it and restructure it and so on. The course is basically 5 modules, and it's sort of structured in a way where, depending on where you are on your writing journey, you would start at a different module. So the more experience you have, the later in the course you can start. But if you're starting as a beginner, it starts with the mindset phase of understanding if you want to make this work long term, what different frames of mind, what's going to happen, and so on. Because you're more on you're fearful maybe a little bit about starting this whole thing. One is about consistency, building that habit. The science of habits is in there, of like how to triggers and so on, all the psychology parts. Then there's some deliberate practice where you add the experimentation in, and then there's some stuff about building an audience and these different archetypes of how can I make money as a writer. So it's very much set up as like a reference book, kind of, I try to think about. So it's more a course of, you might do something, go back for a few weeks, test it, come back, and so on. It's not this. It's not a quick thing. It's not a short thing. It's much more towards like, if you want to be a long-term writer, I think would be a good fit for you, I think.
Right. You really hit on the fundamentals there. And one thing I also really like about your perspective as a teacher is you've been successful on Quora, you've been successful on Medium, you've been, your 4-minute books it comes up all the time when I search a book online, and it gets hundreds of thousands of views per month. And so you're not just giving hey, I happen to be successful on one platform perspective. You're able to give more of a global perspective and guide people that way.
Yeah, and that's also in there. So it's about SEO, it's about Medium, it's about creativity, storytelling angles. So it's really everything I've learned in the first 4 to 5 years of writing. And that was also important to me to just wait to a point where I felt good about actually making a course. So I had some proof to show and some things to teach. And and still I try to make every lesson a story, kind of, where it's examples from movies. You'll see a lot in there, like clips and stuff, so that it's also fun to watch and just not boring.
That's awesome. All right. And I'll link it all up in the show notes. All right. I'll let you go back to writing. And until the next time, Nick, thank you so much again.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on the show. Great conversation. Always enjoyed it. And thanks a lot. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to The Michael Simmons Show. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes. If you found value in today's episode, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast player.